the FBI knows all your thoughts about this sort of thing. I don't know. Yeah, I got one suggestion, in the bonus question for test 3, what did you think of the class? What would you suggest? And the one comment was that it should be closer to me so that it's louder.
Yeah.
And it should have the
Or
screen.
like, don't talk when the video's going, because you can't really hear what you're saying when you've got the
Yeah, it's
video
hard to
going up
tell.
there.
Well, I saw a woman in cars with 2 children in her cart who were she was parked right by the Amazon gift card rack, and they were eating Amazon gift cards and yelling at one another. And she was shopping, actually physically putting stuff into the grocery cart, and she was talking on her cell phone. So that was, 3 major efforts at once. So this is clearly multitasking. But I understand what you mean, that it could be confusing if I'm talking while the video is running.
Well, I was just, I
that's 2
wasn't
modes
here
at
at the
once.
last class, so you can't really hear what you're saying, so you're kind of like missing out on the lecture part, because the video or
Plus,
music
she
or whatever.
really wasn't
overpowers it.
watching the children. Because I was thinking, they're eating Amazon gift cards. That probably isn't really good for the...
Digestion?
It was
Fiber?
Cherry 2000.
Cherry or sherry?
Cherry 2000.
Those
You're
are the
going to
good
email me
ones.
that.
Such a good movie. I love the movie.
You'll email me that, right? Or you could Facebook it too, and it'll pop up in the
I'm not a big Facebook. I'm on Facebook, but I don't. There's so much drama on there that I just kind
Drama.
of. I'm the finger person.
Which is what we should
Oh,
be
that's
talking
really
about,
cool.
actually. Tragedy. That was our first topic. I was so interested in Martha Nussbaum, though, that I brought this book and forgot to bring my textbook. So if we're going to quote anything from the textbook, I hope you have it, not me, because...
I moved houses and I left it at the old place.
Well, what was the other question last class was, Rome or Greece or Rome, which, that's pretty interesting. That's a cheat question too, because obviously they both had a great deal of impact on us.
It's kind of hard to separate the two, too, because Greece gave rise to Rome. I mean,
And
A lot of their gods,
Rome
their
kept
culture.
a lot of the Greek culture. I mean, one of
they spread it
the
around.
great jokes, though, the mathematician jokes, is that the only contribution, or the only mathematical effect that the Romans had on the history of math was that they killed Archimedes, who was Greek. So killing
Wasn't he the one that-
Archimedes.
Like on the beach, he was drawing circles, and
I heard it was actually in a house, but he had a sand table or something in his house, and they came in and told him to stop, and he was get away from the.
don't
he
disturb
was-
my circles.
Yes, he was. So I do recommend to warriors, if you ever go into a house and you see a mathematician at work, don't
Kill him.
Don't kill him.
They're going to do
Well, we
opposite.
lost.
Don't kill him.
Yeah, don't kill him. He was basically inventing calculus
He was
before
in
its
his
time.
house. Why would you go in his house? And
Well, they
kill
had captured the town, and he was like,
They're going door to door.
yeah, looking for tourists. Trying to say it the way George Bush said, tourists, not tourists. That could be. Don't misconstrue the terrorist and the tourists.
It could be both. They're not mutually exclusive.
So, yeah. So interesting quiz questions, but
I said Rome for. I think the biggest reason is
did you actually vote for? Well, it's too late to vote for
I
this
just in the
debate.
email. I thought
Yeah.
Rome simply because 2 reasons. One, Diocletian, how he basically designed what became the economy of Europe, and then his successor, or a few down the line, Constantine, making Christianity into the religion of Rome, that had huge impact on history of the world.
Well, he made it a legal religion, and it was Justinian that made it mandatory,
Right.
which was much later.
Mm-hmm.
However, yeah, pretty significant. Although I was in a little Italian town called Matera the other day. Remember, whenever I say I was in a place that's not like here, I mean I was using my Oculus Rift. That's how I go places. But I was in Matera, mostly because my Aunt Elsie married Joe Matera, and I saw the name Matera, and I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. A town that my uncle's named for, or whatever. He was actually from that region anyway. Not born there, but his family, his ancestors were from there. But so I started looking around and I discovered, wow, this is like a really ancient town. In fact, they refer to it as like the oldest town, one of the oldest towns in the world. And I guess everybody wants to say claim some kind of a tourist place, but
Is it functioning?
yes, primarily for tourists. Most of the buildings are not really livable unless they've had a lot of work done. But you could actually like go to a pension or a hotel like in the structures, and there's shops, and there are some individuals that have homes. There's an architect. You watch a video and you can see the architect in his house, and it's amazing, an amazing house. And he's talking about the architecture of the place, so that's kind of interesting. So it's a real town. It's really there. It's in a gorge. But I mean, if you look at the town, from the air, which of course, if you're using your Oculus, I was using Google Earth to hover around and look at it. So you're looking at the town, but you're looking at it from like this perspective, right? You can see street view, which also even takes you inside, and there's caverns underneath it. They have these cisterns that they made where they keep all the water, and so they have huge reservoirs of water under this town. But it was a Paleolithic site. The place was full of caves, and then as people basically built a town on top of the caves, and then when Rome became Christian, two of the orders, the Benedictines and one of the other orders, used it as a place where they could hang out as hermits in these caves and stuff, all through this area on both sides of the river, etc. So pretty darn interesting. So,
I wonder what the
but
tower
it was
is.
original. I mean, pardon?
I wonder what the tower is.
That's the church. It's a church steeple. 250, I think it said meters high? I forget. Not really that high, but interesting. But see, this was originally a pagan site. But then as Rome became Christian, Christianity moved in, and all the sacred places became sacred places to the new religion. So it gives you the impression that Christianity goes way, way back, further than it was even possible for Christianity to go back into one place. But Christianity did that deliberately. When they went to a town, or when a missionary like St. Martin, I guess, is one of the most famous, right? Member of Tours. And he would go to a town. He would say, "Oh yeah, we've got a saint that's one of our Christian saints. Your God is one of our saints." So we're like this, you know. So you don't have to convert. You were Christians all along. Oh, we were great.
So that's why like a lot of the Christian like traditional holidays take place on what were pagan
Exactly,
holidays before.
exactly.
Like
And every
Christmas,
town you go to, they've
Easter.
got saints and they've got, you know, a sacred hill. You know that Sacred Hill was a church built on top of a pagan temple and part of a, you know, on a druid tree or something. You know, it's all
connected.
all connected. Pretty interesting stuff. However, so let's talk a little bit about the Schopenhauer article. So this art takes away the mist. And this is for Schopenhauer. Remember, he's thinking in terms of the will, which is fate, kismet, karma, whatever. So you can't really know your fate, but it's life sucks. You will die. You're as a child, and I love even the way she talks about this. She's quoting somebody else, but you know. So what does this sound like to you? I'll try this. See what you think. Take glasses. We're supposed to stay on the face. Let me find the center of the universe. A storm threatens. The light turns metallic. The march of clouds across the sky breaks apart. Pieces of sky fly off in different directions. The wind picks up force in silence. There are rushing sounds, but no motion. The wind and its sound have separated. Each chases after its lost partner in fits and starts. The world is disintegrating. Something is about to happen. Uneasiness grows. It spreads from the center and turns into pain. It is at the center that the storm breaks out. It is at the very center that it grows stronger and turns into pulsing waves. These waves push the pain out, then pull it back again. The pulsing waves swell to dominate the whole weatherscape. The world is howling. Everything explodes and is blown out and then collapses and rushes back toward a knot of agony that cannot last, but does. What's that describing, you think?
Does
could
it
be
have anything
so-
to do with the title?
It's a baby who's hungry.
Huh.
An infant. You know, the kind that hasn't
I was
yet...
thinking of delivery.
You know, I was. I knew it was going to be about a baby, as I was, you know, so I was thinking, hey, this is, you know, the delivery. But no, this is, as Stern notes, this description captures the power of hunger, an experience that sweeps through the entire nervous system, disrupting whatever was going on before and imposing its own rhythms and sensations, etc. So, you know, as an adult, you've been hungry lots of times, hopefully never really starving, but you know, oh, well, when you get the chance, you'll have something. And so you're okay. But when you're an infant and these pains come over you, I mean, you know, they cry, they're upset, the whole world is disintegrating, you know.
I
It's
don't
like,
know when they're gonna
yeah.
eat next.
yeah, they don't know. Why is this pain happening? What's going on? Pretty interesting. But a short time later, the hunger storm abates as the infant begins to nurse. At once the world is enveloped. It becomes smaller and slower and more gentle. The envelope pushes away the vast empty spaces. Everything is shifting. A faint promise spurts. The pulsations of explosion and collapse are being tamed, but they are still there, still wild, still ready to break through. Somewhere between the boundary and the very center of the storm, there is a tug, a pulling together. Two magnets wobble toward each other, then touch, lock tight. At the point of contact, a new fast rhythm begins. It rides on top of the slowly pulsing waves of the storm, etc. Pretty interesting. Pretty fanciful. Not pornographic, I hope. Right. But so pretty interesting. But here the argument is, why is there evil in the world? There are evil people. Kant says this, and there are really evil people. Voldemort. Why was Voldemort such an asshole? I mean, really. I mean, he's like, oh, kill the spare. You know, don't even kill the spare. And even him, he looks at it and says, oh, my, what a nice looking boy. You just killed him, asshole, for what? Nothing. So just pure evil, right? Now I can touch you.
He's fictional.
Well, he's fictional, but don't you have an uncle that's like that? No, I'm not blaming your uncle. I mean, there are people like that, aren't there?
Mm-hmm.
And not all of them get elected
Funny.
to be president. I mean, there are evil people out there. Why? Well, we start off absolutely horrified by this life because we're starving to death and we don't know why. So we're very self-centered. We're very solipsistic, so it's me first. I mean, what does she refer to? This is His Majesty the baby, right? When you have one, I don't know.
Uh-huh.
His Majesty the baby. Babies are indeed like royalty, seeing the world as revolving around them and their needs. And when that second one comes, and now all of a sudden mom's attention has to be shared, that's kind of a crisis for the firstborn, and for the secondborn and the third, right? You're not right, that's a crisis. So in a sense, we start off prepped by our own very experience as selfish, and we have to be trained to want to share, right? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You see where she's going with that? So I mean, that's one of the things. If you watch the video,
when nations simply increase their GDP, it positively
So one of the things she's talking. So I mean, this lecture, she won the Kyoto Prize. Have you ever heard of it? It's like the
I learned
equivalent
about
of
it
the
from the
Nobel
video.
Prize, except from Japan. So, Kazuo Inamori donated money for this prize, and so every year a committee selects individuals. These are the three that won the 2017 Kyoto Prize laureates. This guy writes literature. But if you look at the laureates and you look under the different varieties, right? These are the prize winners. But if we go to like categories, so instead of the science ones and so on, if we just look for philosophy and literature, arts and philosophy rather, you can see who've been selected over the years. These are music. This one is arts, painting and stuff. This is theater, thought and ethics, and that's where Martha Nussbaum is listed from 2016. So she won the prize in 2016. Notice others that I've talked about, Charles Taylor won it 2008, Habermas won it 2004, Paul Ricoeur 2000, and Willard Van Orman Quine 1996. Popper. These are all kind of interesting. So the Kyoto Prize is a big deal. and she's the one that won it. It's kind of their version of the Nobel Prize. Right, you're familiar with the Nobel Prizes, right? So that's kind of impressive that she won that for her work. And this, I'm not sure exactly how this works, because this is the prize lecture, and yet this is in the University of San Diego. So that's kind of interesting. But in this, she's talking about philosophy in general, and this really kind of is a good question for this course. I mean, I don't know if any of you had any philosophy courses before. You might have had Intro to Logic, but even if you had logic, this is a very different thing. Logic is a lot more like math applied to language, which is important. But if you think about it, this is probably your first philosophy course, and the question you might have is, what the heck did you get out of this? What is philosophy for, right? You know, what should philosophy be doing? I mean, you have folks like Stephen Hawking, that in his first book that became popular, The Brief History of Time, at the very end, he says, philosophy is dead. You know, we don't need philosophy anymore. And then he proceeds to be very philosophical, you know, in his book and in all of his subsequent books. I mean, he's as much a philosopher as anyone. And philosophy is dead, he says. You know, sciences.
Is he just putting a new name to it?
You know, he's just being silly. Well, you know what? Stephen Hawking is a terrific physicist, but you know what? As far as his studies in other areas, he had none. You know, and thank goodness for his wives and nurse who've taken care of him all these years, because you know, had it not been for them, his life would have sucked. Did you see the movie he was in?
Mm-hmm.
I forget what the title of it was, but it was a beautiful movie. Not A Beautiful Mind, but you know, beautiful mind, busted up body. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. You know.
Is that the one with Robin Williams?
No.
Nope.
It's
Nope.
a new
Nope.
movie?
But
Oh, is it?
Professor Lupin was in it. Professor Lupin. Well, the actor who was Professor Lupin was his math professor in Oxford or something. Or was that Alan Turing? That might have been the Alan Turing movie. I come to think of it, I think it was. Good movies. But in any case, what is philosophy? Do you feel like, as weird as, hopefully, this was a weird course for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
I succeeded in convincing you that nothing makes sense.
I was quite frustrated at the beginning of this
Yes,
course.
I loved it. I thought that was so fantastic.
I'm so glad you got a kick out of it. I really had to let go of a lot to keep coming back.
If you think of it, that is like the philosophy teacher's dream come true, to have a student of your interest and absolutely puzzled. Why are we doing this to
It
ourselves?
just did not make any
It's good for you. It's like,
No, it's not.
it's like, you know, cod liver oil, you know.
Betadine.
Bitters. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Your stomach is upset. Take a glass of bitters. They really do help, actually. I don't use
Help
bitters
induce
anymore.
vomiting.
I use whiskey or brandy or something else, or especially if what I've eaten has been too fatty or something. But really, has philosophy improved or changed your outlook at all? Even the way I weirdly talk about topics and go from one topic to another. I mean, come in to talk about Greece and Rome, and you end up talking about York.
Do you want the real answer?
Yes. Give me grief.
Personally, no, it hasn't changed my outlook. But I have learned a better way to cope with not understanding how people see things.
Well, I consider that a yes.
Well, I mean, I still don't get it.
Oh,
I
yeah,
still
I
don't get
either.
it. I don't get the purpose, why go in circles? Because there is no end if you're just going in circles.
0 is a number. How do I know that 0 is a number? Because 0 is a number. How do I know that 0 is a number? Because
0 is a number.
so I'm going in circles. There's no other way to go. That we know of. I mean, right?
Yeah.
That was an invention. That's the social construction part of tonight too, right? We might as well think a little bit about that ahead of time. Loretta Kurtke, however you say her name, I have not found any place where, maybe I should have just Googled, how do you say this name? Loretta, right? Koertge, is that right? Are you even close? I don't know if you looked her up, Loretta, Koertge, right?
It's
So I looked her up, no
T is
videos.
silent.
I found no videos any place where she's speaking or anything, and yet she's alive and still teaching right now. She has a web page on her university site, although it doesn't even have a picture. You can look at images for her name, and what you discover is lots of different people, and I have no clue which one is actually her.
Does she really exist?
Well, now that's a good question. That does she really have an individuality, etc.? We could wonder about that. And she's talking about the social constructor. What is the social constructor? Well, when I think of the social constructor, I think of Peter Berger. Who was, I'll go to the Wikipedia, is so much better. Sometimes when you get their ad now, right? So I go to Peter Berger, and that's because when I was in college I'm not sure, I think it was senior year, and I was reading, I had Introduction to Sociology, and my one textbook for Introduction to Sociology was a book by Peter Berger titled Invitation to Sociology. And I remember being so impressed with it that I went to the bookstore, the college bookstore, because the town, Westchester, it had one other bookstore at the time, and that was mostly the kind of place where you would buy, it was like a one little room thing. And that's, if anything, the only other thing I ever bought there was the 3-volume set of Lord of the Rings. So that's the kind of thing you could get there. But the college bookstore had another book by Peter Berger sitting right next to the Invitation to Sociology, and it was The Social Construction of Reality, which was a much better book, a little bit more difficult, and I could see why Professor Cohen had picked the one book along with the Book of Readings instead of The Socially Constructed Reality. But in reading that, I was like, yes, it's kind of like Snoopy when his nose is up in the air and he's like, the feet, right? That was me. Because I had also just discovered Hegel, and Hegel was like, philosophy was depressing for me at a certain point. It wasn't like this course. Remember, I had Intro to Philosophy and Intro to Logic the first semester, but then I had the history sequence, so Ancient with Professor Claghorn, who just sent me a Christmas card, by the way. He's in his 90s. He's the sole surviving member of his high school graduating class that just celebrated their 80th anniversary. That's Cape May High School. That's pretty impressive. So I had him for Ancient, and then I had Professor Strevler for Medieval, which was really just the medieval portion, right? In our curriculum, we do ancient and medieval together in one 15-week semester instead of each of them in 18 weeks, right? Then I had modern with Professor Rayukas. And then and modern just took us up to like Kant, right? But then you had 19th century thought. So that's where I got Hegel, right, and stuff. You had existentialism, was Kierkegaard, Sartre, Camus, all those folks, right? Nietzsche, right? But so, and then American philosophy. These are all separate courses. So much richer, curriculum. Of course, I was a philosophy major. Most people wouldn't be taking all of those, but nonetheless, because I had the opportunity, and basically I took all of them. But as you're going through this, especially David Hume depressed me. Remember, I was raised as a Roman Catholic, so I was taught that I had an eternal soul, and at the end of the body's life, my soul would go to heaven, provided I led a good life, right? That kind of thing. And so that was very hopeful, So if life sucks, that's okay. Just make sure you keep your nose clean, and when you die, your soul will be in a much better place. That's like a great story, right? Well, but by the time I got to David Hume, I was absolutely convinced that all that was bunkus. Right? And as a result, I'm like, shit. When I die, that's it. No, forever after in heaven, and I was like, damn, who the heck wants to live this? I gotta get, you gotta get up, you gotta change the baby, you gotta, who the heck wants to put up with this crap?
I read that once. The greatest joke ever played is sentience in a short lifespan.
Yeah. So here you have it. It's very depressing, and it looked like you were just an idiot if you didn't realize it. So I can see where people, the modern day atheists that are mad at religious people. Why don't you grow up and learn that just science is true, and all this other stuff is totally imagination and misleading, because some people will actually kill over differences of scripture. One iota of difference. Did you say homoousius? It's homoousius. Don't you ever get that wrong, or I will stab you to death. Because the Jesus that taught us to love one another was also God, and not. So I'll stab you to death if you don't get that right. Sorry.
No,
That's just
you're
true.
not wrong, though.
They literally kill one another over one iota of difference. I talked about that, right? That's just true. So I can see why the militaristic atheists are so upset. They want to prune human culture of all of these religions because all they see is the really bad part of it, and they think science, yay, science. I might be just an animal, and my job is to be born, procreate, and die. And it doesn't sound very exciting. But you know what? At least I'm sane. And I'm not going to go out there and kill somebody because they prefer Darwinian evolution to that other kind of evolution that I can't read. Lamarckian evolution. What? You're a Lamarckian? Arr. No, you don't see scientists doing that. Well, actually, you saw Soviet communists doing that.
Why couldn't
almost
it be
precisely
both?
that kind of thing. They thought that they could train wheat to grow in the cold, just by making it grow anyway in the cold. Of course, it didn't work, and starved a lot of people.
That just shows we put ideology first. What can happen. Well, you can ignore reality, but you cannot ignore the consequences of ignoring reality.
But yeah, So social construction. So
Yeah,
so
exactly.
So Hegel was like, yes, because Hegel basically explained that, well, it's all metaphor anyway. We're all making it up as we go, but some stories have better results than others. That's what, the same thing that converted C.S. Lewis, was realizing, hey, it's a narrative. We need narrative, and this is a better narrative. Right? He went through the same crisis as a kid. He was a Christian, grew up, got educated, realized this is all crap, became an atheist. But then while he was teaching and friends with Tolkien and Watson, and he was heavily influenced by MacDonald, the author MacDonald, whose books are still available. It's all story. He became converted to the idea that what's significant is the story you believe in, and some stories have better results for human life. And guess what? We're inventing anyway. You can interpret theory. So, who's Jesus? Jesus is an idea. And the Jesus idea is, much more advanced than kill an eye for an eye, right? Instead, love your neighbor as yourself. They slap me on the one cheek, turn the other side and say, you want to make something? No, turn the other cheek, right? That's a better story. Christianity came up with a better story. What we're looking at when we're looking at the evolution of religion is the evolution of the better and better story that results in the better and better life for more and more people. That's really the point of what that evolutionary process that enables the best religion to, what is the best religion? The one that gives the most people the best kind of life and enables the best kind of society that also competes against the other competitive religions and other competitive societies, until we get to, of course, what we're hoping we're reaching pretty soon is a world where now, instead of different cultures competing with one another, we're all one big happy family. Not yet.
Not in my lifetime.
Well, you could tell Martha Nussbaum is hopeful. She's hopeful. And she's trying to figure out what keeps us still evil in the world. Well, we start out as infants where we're trained to be selfish. How do you train someone whose experience starts off like that to get over it to the point where you can care for someone else who's so completely different? That's education, which is philosophy's job. But at the same time, I came aware of Hegel's philosophy and started seeing how all that essentially became the new paradigm that essentially led to evolution, psychology, sociology, etc. Then I also saw the Peter Berger's social construction. The reality is we really do create ideas, and he even uses Hegel's concept of concrete, with, the Roman invention. You take a mixture which is very portable. You add water to it. You have mix it all up, and you pour it into a mold. So this is man-made, right? We take the mold away, let it dry, and when we come back, it's a rock. So we made it, but it's now as real can get, right? So if you think about it, money is a favorite example of this. Money is an invention, and it only works because we're all in agreement that it works. Like Bitcoin. Are you interested in Bitcoin? Anybody buy any Bitcoin?
Should have.
One of my friends just did.
Who?
One of my friends just did.
One of your friends just did? You have to spend a lot to get any, don't you?
Yeah, he spent like $400 for 0.05 on the Bitcoin. So it's crazy.
And it's going,
Why?
I don't know.
It's going up in value.
Yeah, it just hit.
It's going up like
19
crazy.
It hit 19K
Yeah,
a day
it's-
ago, I think.
Yeah, and what's going to happen though is it's going to be an actual open stock, isn't it, or something? But it's something. I was watching a news show, and something's going to happen soon, and as a result, that's what's driving the craze, right? But they're all arguing over. So what happens once this change takes place? Because now it'll be completely open for everyone to compete on the buying and selling it.
Yeah.
And no one really knows how to predict whether that's going to increase its value or decrease it. So the one person is arguing, I think that's really going to increase it because it's like Facebook. Everyone else is going to come up with a competing technology, but Facebook is still, by right of firstborn kind of media. Everybody uses it, right? And the other person points out, wait a minute, wasn't there? What was the other one?
MySpace.
MySpace, yeah. So there's the question: is Bitcoin MySpace or Facebook? Right? Because if you're investing in it, you want it to be Facebook.
Yeah.
But what if you invest in it and in a couple days it becomes MySpace? Crash. But what are we talking about? We're talking about a human invention that has value because psychologically we create the value for it. It's not like you can say, oh, I don't believe in it, so I'm not going to invest in it, as some people say, and it'll go away. Well, no, guess what? It's not going away. Some people hate Facebook, but you know what? It's not going away. It's transforming the world. I mean, literally, it was one of the media used by the revolutionaries in Tahrir Square that were able to organize and essentially throw out, we don't even remember the dictator's name anymore, do we? Anybody still remember the Egyptian president? No, we don't.
Or a Libyan guy.
His name began with an M. He was sitting in trial in the cage for a while, and he's dead now, right? I think. Didn't he die? Mubarak. Hosni Mubarak. So Facebook, human invention, but real. Perfect example of the socially constructed reality. Because once it's created, it's concrete. You can't just will it away. It's a rock now and has an effect on us, right? Culture is this way, in a sense. But it's ambiguous because there are some aspects of culture, like Bjork, for example, writing odd music and creating odd videos that make you feel, gee, that's very unsettling. I don't really like that, but I don't know what to think of it. Maybe the music isn't very good, arguing over music. Is music real?
Sound.
But immediately it goes away.
Not really.
And if all the orchestras in the world died, there wouldn't be any more new music.
That assumes that there would never be an orchestra again.
Yes?
Huh? See, you taught us well. We can talk in circles.
But you get the idea. I mean, as an art, it's not a plastic art. Plastic art's being what? Sculpture, painting, right? All the ones where you can make stuff. Plastic arts. It's not like dance, but dance is in some ways the same kind of thing. Because if I go to see a dance, she does the dance,
When she stops.
and she stops, the dance is over. Of course, we could add to the confusion on this because we have recording, both video and audio, right? So we can say, oh, here's a particular dance. right one? Well, I'll just do this. So, in some sense, that's still there. Even though the performance occurred once, and traditionally we think of dance and music as something that happens, and if you didn't see it, you missed it. Right? It's a shame. You should have been there. It was fantastic. Oh, you know. But now we have recording methods, so you can see it over and over again. So does that change the way we think about whether it's kind of a abstract art? You know, I mean, it's not like concrete picture that I can go to the museum and see it for myself. Right? Dance, you would have not been able to do that. You had to be there for the performance. But now it's not that way, because we can actually replay it if someone's recorded it for us. In fact, with the Oculus, I was in the Place de la République in Paris as they were celebrating
Move your camera.
one of their, pardon?
Can I move your camera?
Yes. That's a good place for it to go. And include. But so, is it still running?
Mm-hmm.
No kidding. I did put fresh batteries in it, but I wasn't sure whether I put 2 fresh batteries or 1, because I had the
Well,
new-
you want to get that, right?
Yeah, except then Shazam will tell me I'm in trouble. I was just doing that as a teaching tool. See, here's dance. That dance happened once, but look, we can still watch it. And now with virtual reality cameras, here I am celebrating Macron's election with all of his followers in the Paris, square, etc. What? That was like almost a year ago, and yet it's still there. So even though I wasn't in Paris, didn't get my free flag, French flag, and out of the box,
You got a
joined
virtual
everybody in
one
the
and
square,
then you
and then
took
as
off
they
your-
announced yes that he won, and everybody was going, I'm right there, wherever the cameraman was, I'm like, whoa, I could, if I had my own French flag, I could be in the den.
Then
My
you
kids
took off
would
your
probably
wrist
call
and
the
it's
police.
gone.
I could replay it. You can play it over and over. I could go find it, and save it. And go back. But still, it was man-made. It's a socially constructed reality. What about feminine roles? Or masculine roles, right? Is there a difference between the way, like, remember I asked, is it important for the father to help raise the child? Everybody agreed, yes, of course. Right?
Like, what about for same-sex marriages?
Is that a real marriage?
Well, I mean, they can adopt children.
But you get what we're talking about here is these are socially constructed aspects of society. Years ago, there would have been no such thing as a same-sex marriage, although strictly speaking, I have a same-sex marriage.
Maybe not
Got
the
married
marriage
45
itself,
years
but
ago,
that
and it's
never.
the same sex all the time.
That doesn't say that the feelings weren't there.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. And I'm not
That's
taking
a fairly,
sides on
It's
this.
a fairly modern concept, though, to say marriage is like about feelings and about making you happy and things like that, which is how we look at it today. But historically, marriage is all about making a family, and it wasn't really about whether that made you happy or not. It It was your responsibility to make more
But,
kids.
but the social constructionists would come in and say, so all of this was man-made,
Right.
and they could argue,
It's
was
man-made
it
for a
based
reason.
on something concrete in reality that we didn't have any control over, or can we just change these roles, think of some new, more just way of treating people, and create new kinds of relationships that are man-made, they're socially constructed, but once we construct them, you actually get a certificate that says we're married. Right. I thought it was kind of interesting that if you look at this is the person who introduces Martha Nussbaum.
And I know so many of her students, all of whom are marked with wonder at how
This is
generous
Dr.
and
Watson.
gracious she is as a mentor.
Did anybody notice?
So much of her work takes up
Pardon?
the philosophical questions concerning what it
Yes.
takes to be truly human, what capabilities we must secure
Now this
to
is
ensure a
interesting because
flourishing life
even
for
though
all
she
persons.
is
For Martha
she
Nussbaum,
and
this
goes
is
by
not
she,
just an academic
she
question.
is wearing a
She is
power
devoted to
suit.
securing the conditions for human
Masculine
flourishing for
power
her
suit.
students, for her colleagues, for women
You
abroad
notice?
she has never
Isn't
met,
that kind of
and
interesting?
indeed for all of humanity. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Martha Nussbaum.
But if you saw Dr. Watson on the street and you didn't know she was who she was, our socially constructed reality tells me
Well,
that
it's hard.
she is a male, a dominant male. Because of the suit, right? The clothes are kind of significant, right? This is why you take one look at me and you wonder, what the hell is that? Right?
That's a professor.
Who cares less, about what he looks like because he's retired now, and he can show up however he looks.
Did you dress like that before you were retired? Or her? The other her.
I've actually worn outfits that I thought made me look professorial. And in fact, I had one student once say to me, the first meeting, first class, looked at me and he said, "You look exactly the way a professor should look." And I was like, yes!
Success.
There's the socially constructed reality, you look it up, professor, you're supposed to look, minus the pipe or cigar, because, that's, smoking is bad for you. But, beard is a good thing, the beard, and this is my almost Santa Claus, thing, almost there. But you get the idea, these are roles that are created by us. Greetings. Can we change them? Do we have? We literally can operate on a person who feels like they're male or female and their body is wrong, and they can literally change it. And that's ambiguous too, because we have some people that are hermaphroditic. We have some people. I have one ex-student who only has one X chromosome. What's the name of that?
Down syndrome?
No, that's an
Turner?
extra chromosome.
Turner?
Oh, whoops.
Turner? Is it Turner syndrome? I think. Yeah, so from what I understand, most people, most females that have Turner syndrome, males don't have it, right? Can. It's instead of a double X, just have one X, right? As a result, they can't have children.
You can be XXYs though. You can have.
I've heard,
So
yes,
it's
but that's
and Y.
something else, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's
that's
not Turner.
totally different.
But so there are, so I had one student just the other day who argued that if you're XX, you're female, even if you feel like you ought to have been male and you have a sex change and take the hormone and everything else so that you live a life that's male, because your genes are XX, you're still female. That was his argument. But what grounds does he have for that? I mean, if you're totally female or male in appearance, no one's going to be able to check your DNA. In fact, that's a new invention. It's a new human invention, DNA. It's a real thing, but again, it's an invented human concept because of our science, right? Are they making this muddy enough for it to be as confusing as you prefer? I'm still
Tell me
working
that
within this.
confusing.
Boy, that looks like an ass, doesn't it? Sorry about that.
I was just thinking. I was thinking that a little earlier.
So if you have lots of things that you're using in your argument, you could say, okay, so this is circular reasoning. But it's not viciously circular, like we had up there before, right? It's just too, it is because I say it is kind of argument, right? This one, you might have, the infinite is, whatever, so that I have line A through B, there's an infinite series of points here, but I also have A through C, there's an infinite number of points here, but in fact this infinite is the same number as this infinite, right?
Right.
In fact, if I go from A to 0.01, it's an infinite, it's the same infinite as this infinite, and et cetera, so that if you had, okay, help somebody with math tell me how 0.99999, et cetera, equals 1. Which is true, from what I understand.
It is true.
It is true. I don't understand it, but it's supposed to be
So if
true.
you divide 1 by 3, what do you get 1/3? What's 1/3?
That's what they do.
Yeah, what's 1/3?
That's what he's
Point-
going to do.
point
He's going to
33
convince us
repeating,
that
right?
this equals that.
So if you multiply 0.33 repeating times 3, what is it? It's 999 repeating. So you multiply the third by 3, so that's 1. So it has to be the same.
You see what he just did? It's 1. Thank you. I was really counting on someone here, and I figured you would be the one
I watched number 5.
that would be able to do this for me, because I didn't think that I was going to be able to. I've read it a couple times, but it hits my head like so. I needed help with that. Thank you. And that's math, which is like, wow, math that you can count on math totally. Really? You totally made it up. Math is totally socially constructed.
Or did we discover it?
The social constructor would be pleased to point out to you that even if you thought we discovered it because it was real out there, that conception itself is only socially constructed. Because there is no real out there. until we create the concept of reality. So reality is socially constructed.
You
The
are
social
so
construction of reality.
treading the I'm looking at me in the mirror, but it's not me line again.
You see how thrilled I was? There's the Snoopy, thing. Yes. Hegel, Peter Berger, they're the same. And I was very happy after that. I've been happy ever since. I mean, occasionally I get depressed over things. Because when I first graduated with my bachelor's, I was still in my master's program, I was working for a Wawa Food Markets, like a 7-Eleven shop. I was exhausted working for them. Having like a real workaday job where you've got to like show up and put in actual hours, etc., is exhausting. You come home from that and you're tired, and then you look at philosophy. There's no way. So going to graduate school, working full-time, teaching part-time, and being exhausted. You could get depressed occasionally. Especially when you never had enough money either, right? Because, as a graduate school student, even though they were paying my course, I didn't pay even a penny for my graduate degree. It was free. They paid me. That's the way to do it, by the way.
How did you manage that?
I got the graduate assistantship, and so they had me teach courses, and they gave me all my credits for free, and paid me each semester. It wasn't much. Notice I still had to work full time to pay the
Better than
rent
nothing.
and stuff. But yeah, otherwise, if you're going to graduate school, it could cost you a lot. And if that tax bill includes that part where the graduate student gets the credits for free, that becomes taxable income. And if it's an expensive place where you're paying you're getting $40,000 worth of free tuition that semester, that's $40,000 taxable income. All of a sudden now the little stipend that they give you won't cover your taxes for the free credits that you got, so you're not going to be able to afford to do this. It's going to destroy graduate education. You didn't hear about that?
No.
That's part of.
If you get free stuff over a certain value, you have to claim it. And tax and credit, credits in college count. It's like I work for a gun shop, and there's a promo where if you sell enough guns of a certain kind, that company will give you a free one. If it's over $1,000, they'll send you the tax thing you have to fill out.